Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Mona, your host of Belonging Reimagined. But today, I'm just Mona. It's a special episode today where we are going to be talking about mental health in light of May being Mental Health Month. And with that, in this special episode, we have a special host, and I'm actually going to be the guest today. And so our special host is Julius, who has been the show's producer and one of my new favorite people. And so he is going to be interviewing me. And I don't know all the questions he's going to ask, so I'm going to be finding out with all of you. And so I think we're going to be delving a little bit into what mental health is, what it's not. And you'll probably hear a few stories about me, I suspect. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our wonderful producer, Julius.
Thank you, Mona. And happy to be able to interview you today. We've worked together for a couple of months now, and I've heard bits and pieces of your story and your journey. And I think it's amazing, and especially you being in the place that you are today to be able to help other people, I think is a special and amazing thing. I want to start off today by asking you, how would you define mental health and self-care?
So I'll start with what mental health is. Mental health is not an endpoint. It's not a place, of arrival. It's not a point of arrival, in other words, where, you get there and then your work is done. It reminds me of taking a shower and self-care. It's not same thing. It's not just a point of arrival. You don't take a shower and say, oh, I'm good for the month. You don't say, I brushed my teeth. I brushed my teeth last week. I'm good for a couple more days. It doesn't really work like that. It's very similar to our physical health. We don't say, I'm just going to eat healthy this one day this year and I'm good. And so, oftentimes we think of, getting a massage or getting your nails done or taking a bath, that's self-care, and it is. And those things are wonderful. Oftentimes those things are also luxuries that not everyone's afforded. But what really mental health is a journey first and foremost. And it's a journey that doesn't have a final destination. It continues to evolve. And so we hear a lot of language around like working to be your best self. But because we are ever changing people, there is no best self. There is no, again, final destination. And when we reach these mental health goals, or when we reach these personal development goals, just like that, they tend to change again because we have changed as people and we're not these static beings. Mental health is a journey that's ever evolving, and we need to give it space to breathe and change. But ultimately, what it looks like is, do I feel good about who I am, where I am, who I'm around, who I have around in my life right now, and the general path that I'm on.
Luckily, there is more of a societal push for people to take that journey. I think it's important that everyone does so. I think it's a great thing that we have evolved as a society where mental health awareness is becoming part of the daily conversation. What would you say the future effects of this will be for generations that did not grow up with that encouragement to take this journey? What do you think the long-term effects of that will be for the generations to come?
It's hard to say what the long-term effects are going to be of mental health awareness and the breaking down of stigma around mental health that continues, and we're not, where we need to be in many communities. Reaching out for a therapist, for example, is still not considered acceptable, is still considered weak. And so we have a ways to go. But in general, we are seeing a trend of it being more normalized for people to be talking about mental health. Sometimes that involves a therapist. Sometimes that involves invoking more rituals into daily practice. Um, Sometimes that involves a deep identity exploration. Oftentimes it involves an exploration of belonging. That's something where, you hear that word being used more in terms of who are the people that are around me in my life. Um, I can't say. I don't have the crystal ball in terms of where it's gonna go, but I can see the trend that's happening, and what I'm seeing now compared to a few years ago is that there's more conversation around mental health, um, and a lot of that has been tied to identities, and people are talking more about what their different identities are and the intersection of those identities. In other words, for me, I'm a brown, cisgender woman um, who's autistic, who has a disability, who is educated, who comes from an upper socioeconomic status. I have to own those privileges as well. And we're starting to talk more about who we are. And as that conversation becomes more mainstream, as we're seeing, um, I think that the future could hold more empathy as a collective for one another and being able to respect the different lived experiences that we've had, um, and also see the commonality in our humanity.
What are some key points in your journey that has inspired you to hop into the mental health space and to help other people along with their journey?
There's so many points along the way. One of the things that's important to know is that we all have struggles, and there's not a single point in time that gets us to where we are. And so I can't point to one singular time that led me to be a therapist. Um, and I will miss a lot of moments in my memory that you know contributed to pivoting me, these little kind of pivots along the way, that got me to where I am now, and who knows to where I'll be going. I think the thing that's most obvious that stands out for me is experiencing the unexpected loss of my two younger brothers when I was 8 years old in a drowning accident when they were 3.5 and 4.5. So that's a more obvious one. I think some other areas would be from childhood, where I would just had perpetual identity crisis, which isn't uncommon for folks. For me, my particular flavor of crisis was um, growing up in a town where nobody else really looked like me and where very few people had similar shared experiences as me. And the ones who did, we weren't in connection with one another. We were either in different grades or our families weren't connected or lived in different neighborhoods or whatever the case might be. So I was pretty alienated as a child, even though on the outside it might not have looked like that. Um, I think another is my experiences with being autistic without naming it and without realizing that that's what was going on, this certain kind of internal alienation. So, a lot of the experiences I had in childhood were really around isolation, and that certainly contributed down the road to having a deep empathy for other people, and that empathy I think translated into an obvious career in mental health. But for a while, I actually fought being a therapist. Even after I got my degree, even after my master's degree, I actually didn't want to be a therapist and wasn't for many years. I think developing empathy unwittingly at a young age and not knowing how to manage it could be really challenging for a therapist. And so it wore me out to go into clinical sessions. But those are some of the childhood experiences, and some of the fight that I felt later on as an adult. Throughout that period, though, in between, there were periods of being in relationships um, that didn't suit me, or that I probably wasn't suited to be in. I didn't know how to date. I didn't know how to do any of these things. I was socially awkward in many ways. And so again, the identity exploration was um, was something that I delved into in my 20s and in my 30s, which later led to maybe I want to dig a little bit deeper into this mental health career thing.
That's amazing. And we're all happy that you did because just seeing the way that you have interacted with a few of your guests on the show so far, um, you have a great way of connecting with people and pulling the best out of them in these conversations. And um, I think that that's something that a lot of people uh, look for in a therapist and look for in somebody who they need in their lives to be able to um, break that barrier and to really get real and to really talk about things that they've never spoken about in their lives before. So I think that that's um, very important to have. And um, it's just been amazing to see you bring that on as a host. But I'm pretty sure that that's the same energy that you bring in your sessions as well. So that's just amazing.
Thank you.
Um, Two things that I've heard you say in the past that I think really go hand in hand is that you didn't people well, but people need people. Why is it important for the sake of balance and um, mental health for us to connect with each other and to find a sense of belonging with other people?
I said I didn't people well, not knowing that I was autistic. So it makes me chuckle now. I think I'm also quite introverted, and so sometimes I don't people well, okay? And it's just the truth, folks, and I know that many folks feel that same way. It's like I love pretty much everyone, believe it or not, even people who have done horrific things, because I am certainly no saint. But I don't always like being around people, even the people I love the most. And a lot of that is, I think, sensory stuff with the autism, but also just like, give me a damn break, folks. I just need to like sit in the corner with a book, or I just need some quiet time, or I just need some downtime to decompress. But at the end of the day, like we all need each other. We are social creatures, and biologically, we have to have each other in order to not go into deep depression. Um, and also to not go into an anxious spiral. And that's because instinctively, we know that we can't survive without one another. And so that's the anxious part of it, where our fight, flight, freeze, fawn parts of our bodies can be activated because the body instinctively knows that it cannot survive all by itself. Um, so that's one. And then the other is the depressive part, because we seek human connection. Um, we actually have chemicals that release in our brains that give us that happy feeling, that give us that sense of deep bonding with someone, that improves our mental health and also has been shown to help us live longer. So, from a survival standpoint, we need one another. Um, but we also can use a little agency, or a lot of agency, in terms of like knowing our own individual bodies, how much we can handle being around people for how long, what kind of people we could be around. And so that's why I think it's so important to be very selective, as much as you have the luxury of being very selective about who are those other humans that you're around, who are those people that you hang out with. And so, yeah, that's really what we're here to do, is to be with one another and figure out how to do that sometimes.
In the spirit of people need people, with mental health being a journey, that journey looks different for everyone. You have some journeys that look different because you're a person of color. You have some journeys that look different because you've gone through generational trauma. When we're all living life day by day, walking these different journeys, how can we support each other? What are some tools to be able to help support each other through our journeys, even though we're all on different paths?
One of the greatest things that we can do for one another as people, as fellow humans, is to see one another's humanity. And that's for people up close and people you don't know. And the key to that is humility. Humility means there's something I don't know. There are things that I don't know. And that could be with your partner who might be having a bad day or who's being a little bit snippy and you don't realize that, that they literally just got fired. I've actually had a partner that happened to one time. I had no idea. Um, that could be this other group of people who are uh, making decisions that you don't understand what they're doing, or you've already decided why it is that they're doing something and you've attributed it to their character when maybe the reason that they robbed that place was because they are in dire need, for example. People you might see on the news, for example, people who live in other countries and you don't understand some of the wars that are going on. Just knowing that you don't know is humility in itself. And I truly believe that it is the way to belong back to one another again.
I wanted to take it back to that little girl that you mentioned of feeling isolated or feeling like you didn't belong. Knowing what you know today and the tools that you have today, what would you say to that little girl?
I've had a lot of conversations with that little girl who blamed herself for uh, all the things as children tend to do. Um, and what I would say to her is that she's deeply wise beyond her years, and that can be confusing and isolating sometimes, but that it gets better, and that she will eventually be able to find her people along the way who have that shared awkward wisdom, and there will be true connection there. But in the meantime, there are people along the way who are helpers and who are loving, and that she doesn't have to be completely understood in order to be embraced, in order to be loved. And that leaning into that can feel like a warm hug that creates a sense of safety that she doesn't fully know herself yet either. So there's more to be revealed and there's more to be understood. And that in itself is a journey.
As you continue on with your mental health journey, what are some of your safe spaces, both externally and internally? What do you do to make yourself feel safe on a daily basis?
To make myself feel safe on a daily basis, I have to go back to the spirit of who I am. The two things that I've really held on to in my identities are having a spirit of learning and having a spirit of sharing. And when I am unsure of myself or when I'm unsure of the world around me, I go back to that because I have control over those things. And we don't have control over the way the world receives us. Um, but I do have control over the way I receive myself. And as I am sitting in the space of learning or sharing or both, then I feel settled in who I am. And even being here today, yeah, I was kind of shaky at first and my eyes started to water and I closed my eyes and I took a few breaths and I said to myself, this isn't about you. This is about sharing. Um, and through sharing, I'll probably learn a few things about myself. And when I do that, then I can be at ease. It gives me that sense of safety right away.
This being Mental Health Awareness Month, we want as many people to feel as safe as possible to be able to take that first step and start their journey. And with so much happening in the world today, again, it's more important than ever to really take care of our minds and to be at peace and to make sense of it all. Um, but there are a lot of people who are on the fence who have never gone to therapy or who haven't sought help. What would you say to those people who are on the fence? What is that thing that you have seen in your current and previous patients that was the push they needed to finally take that step to go to therapy and start their mental health journey?
So many people start their mental health journey because they're at a breaking point, and then they're almost in some level of crisis mode. And for folks who do that, finding mental health support can be a real challenge in itself in terms of finding immediate support. And so there's this frantic calling around or reaching out, and then they might not hear back from places, which mental health practices do better, please. At least call back and provide resources. Um, and so I would just say that if you're able to access therapy, then do it now if you can. Just having someone there to talk with about just generally what's going on in your life so that you've already built that relationship with someone when the time comes. Even if it's having a few sessions with someone, getting to know them, feeling things out, seeing if you're comfortable, do that. That's one option. Another option has nothing to do with therapy. And the other option would be what Dr. Muriel Bouquet, who wrote the fantastic, brilliant book, Break the Cycle. It's a guide to intergenerational healing, intergenerational trauma. And she says, identify co healers in your circle and finding folks or identifying folks and having an agreement to do healing work together, whatever that might look like for you, is incredibly powerful because there's something so special about locking arms with someone and going forward with someone and a commitment to expand your human experience and to heal old wounds. It's incredibly healing to do that with other people in community. And that might look like um, certain self-care things that you do together. That might look like talking on the phone with one another. That might look like going on walks together. That could look like doing certain kind of activities like sound healing baths together. It could look like meditating together. It could look like a number of different things. There's no one way to heal. And I think we can get stuck into this like colonized way to heal that you go and you find your therapist who looks a certain way, who takes a certain approach, and you go for your 55 minutes once a week. You could do that, but there's so many other ways to do that too. Uh, Obviously, I'm a big proponent of mental health therapy for folks that that's useful for. I actually don't go to a therapist. It doesn't work for me. And so that can sound ironic, but it's true. That's not something that works for me. I have co-healers. I have daily rituals that I do. I listen to my body. I pause every hour for about 5 minutes and really tune in. I have my own creative way of maintaining and improving my mental health. And so those are some ways for people who do want to talk to with a therapist, and don't have financial access or don't have insurance, for example. Usually, local universities who have counseling or social work programs have graduate student interns who offer services for free, or there are private practices that might be around who have interns for free. And so you can go to different therapy resource sites where it's like find a therapist near me. Basically, you can do a search for that and you can look for pro bono or sliding scale therapist. And most cities are have them, and if not, most states do. And if you have access to internet, then teletherapy could be an option as well.
Yeah, definitely want to remove as many barriers as possible for people who want to seek that type of help. So that's amazing. So I think a lot of us know someone, or we have people in our lives who we can tell they're struggling. We can tell that something is different, that they're going through something, but we don't quite know how to approach it or how to help and how to support them. What are some tools that people can keep that will allow them to connect with their loved ones who they can tell are struggling, but might not have the tools or the will yet to seek help?
Watching a loved one struggle with their mental health and they're not in a place yet to take steps to support themselves is one of the most challenging experiences. And it can bring up a number of feelings. And let's just name them honestly. First of all, frustration. It's not just sadness and helplessness. Those are the obvious ones. It can be really annoying, y'all. Let's just say it, to see someone not helping themselves and even more so doing things that are harming themselves. And so, first and foremost, what I want to say is you can't save people from themselves. We can support them if someone is in crisis mode in terms of like suicidality, or they could be a threat to themselves or someone else. And in a very critical moment, sure, um, we can, call a hope line, or we can call the 988 suicide line, or you could call 911 if somebody needs to be transported to an emergency room. Those are options in a crisis point. But in terms of like a general state that someone is in, we can't save people. And that goes for therapists too. We tend to think that therapists come in and save people, and that is not our job. So if therapists can't do it, I'm just letting people know that that's not your job. And it's also not something that you can reasonably do. So take that expectation off of yourself. I'm going to go back into humility, one of my favorite, not just words, but concepts, and connection. And so when we look at the model on belonging that I developed, there are three different layers of it. It's seeing someone, embracing someone, and celebrating someone. And so seeing someone means that you're able to identify their likes, their dislikes, their quirks, um, their personality, who they are, their values. Embracing someone is an interest-like connection where there's just unconditional positive regard, there's unconditional love there, there's no judgment. And then celebrating someone is openly acknowledging, whether publicly or privately, but openly acknowledging to that person their lived experiences. And that could be celebratory in terms of something positive that's happening, in their lives, or it could be a challenge that they're facing. And so creating that connection for someone, that sense of belonging for them in any of those levels, or as many of those levels that you can do, um, it what that does is it creates belonging for that person, or an opportunity for belonging. And belonging is connection, and the opposite of connection is isolation. And so when someone feels that bit of connection from you, that's a little bit less isolation that they're feeling. So that's what we can do. Um, if it's somebody who's not open to getting mental health support in terms of professional services, then creating connection for them in the ways that you can be very powerful for them. But also, you have to watch out for your own mental health, because after a while, that can become quite draining. And so, doing that in the ways that you can, or finding other helpers for them in their lives, identifying other people in their lives so that you're not carrying this by yourself. It really does take a community to support one another in general, regardless of where we are in our mental health journey. So, also considering the different breadths of belonging. So, there's self belonging. You might be helping them with that. There's interpersonal belonging. That is something you could directly can do, but also identifying community for them. And you can encourage them to be parts of different communities. That could be different sports that they like to play, or book clubs that they might be a part of, or family members that they that are trusted family members that they could be around. And so that's three of the four places. And then the fourth one is really huge, and that's universal belonging. And oftentimes that can show up in by way of life purpose or making meaning of life or life calling. And so if you're in a position to help that person connect with something that helps them feel like a part of this world, then that can also be incredibly moving for that individual.
You've already hinted at this by saying belonging is connection, but the big question we ask everybody here, what does belonging mean to you?
Oh, goodness. I should have seen that one coming. Oh, oh, Julius. All right. So y'all know my formal definition. Belonging is the experience of being seen, embraced, and celebrated across four different life spaces: the self, one-on-one relationships, in community, and in a macro system, like universally in some way. For me personally, belonging means uh, being able to be as big or as small as I damn well please in any given moment. And so it's, I think oftentimes for women and particularly women of color, um, there's this sense of either being too much or not enough. And so belonging for me means that I'm enough based on however way I determine I want to show up in a given space.
Amazing. Love that. So, closing remarks on the month. With Mental Health Month, what do you encourage people to do? And what do you hope people take away by the end of Mental Health Month?
I encourage people to connect with one another. I encourage people to be more curious about themselves and about other people. I encourage people to have a spirit of learning and to have a spirit of sharing about learning about themselves, sharing parts of themselves um, with others or with themselves. In other words, like having time boundaries. If you're an oversharer of your time, maybe having time boundaries and share some of that time with yourself. Um, but really leaning into the idea that the world is really, really big and that there's so much more to what's possible for you than the little tiny microcosms that we live in, these little bubbles that we live in. Um, there's so much more to the world than that. And I encourage people during Mental Health Month to be adventurous and coming out of those bubbles and seeing what the world might have to offer and what they might be surprised that they can offer to the world. And that can be in so many different life spaces, again, with just yourself, with one-on-one relationships that you might develop or that you might nurture that old friendship that you haven't, come back to in a while, or that friend you haven't chatted with in a while, with connecting with your own community or maybe exploring new communities, with sitting with making meaning of life and leaning deeper into that. Those are the things that create deeper connection for ourselves and the world within ourselves and the world outside of ourselves. And that is one of the greatest barriers to isolation, which means it's one of the greatest contributors to excellent mental health.
Thank you so much, Mona, for sharing your story and shedding light on the importance of mental health and taking that journey and what that means for other people. You've shared a lot with us today, a lot of helpful tools that we can use, not just in the month of May, but for the rest of our lives. And we can't thank you enough for the work that you do.
I'm so incredibly grateful to be able to have this platform. I'm grateful to you, Julius, and to the Resonate Recordings production team for your commitment to getting stories out there and to helping other people feel more connection in their lives. Um, and then on a personal level, in terms of my family and life experiences, I'm actually incredibly grateful for the grief that I've experienced growing up, and in my adulthood. I'm incredibly aware of how impactful pain can be on developing empathy. And because empathy is such a core part of who I am, I wouldn't give up the pain because I wouldn't have this deep empathy without it. And so if I'm not willing to give up the pain, that means I can't give up the experiences that led to them. So for any of the people who have been a part of painful experiences that I've had, and that includes people that I deeply love, by the way, that's not like throwing shade. I couldn't be more joyful. And that's the greatest irony. And so I love everyone, oddly. So I appreciate the listeners who sit here in these conversations, because it feels like you're right here on the couch with us chatting. And I love you all and appreciate you.